Hello, everybody, and welcome to Penguins to Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Today, we want to talk about Jake Guentzel because, yes, the Pittsburgh Penguins and Kyle Dubas have plenty of work to do this offseason. It never hurts to look into the future a little bit, especially when it's your leading scorer entering his final year of his current contract. So, while no, we don't have any idea of what Jake Guentzel at this moment would want in his next contract, we do know that there's a comparable that has come out earlier this week. Jake Guentzel is perhaps the most important player not named Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, or Chris Letang on the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's entering that last year of his contract, so the Penguins are officially allowed to begin negotiating a new contract with the 28-year-old scorer. And like I mentioned before, the market has already been set. Thankfully for the Penguins, if they want to get this deal done now before the market changes, and it could change depending on how far the salary cap is bumped this offseason, they're going to want to do it following the move that happened earlier this week from the Montreal Canadiens. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Canadiens signed Cole Caulfield to an 8-year extension worth $7.85 million per season. To me, Cole Caulfield is a pretty close comparison to what Jake Guentzel is for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Both are the top left wings on their respective teams. Both are the top goal scorers on their respective teams. Both play the game a bit undersized. Cole Caulfield much more than Jake Guentzel. Guentzel is listed at 5'11". Cole Caulfield is listed at 5'7". But both do play a bit undersized, and both are very integral to their team's respective top power play units. The only key difference, and that's going to come into play when I talk about where the figures should start for Jake Guentzel. The only key difference is Cole Caulfield is 22 years old right now. Jake Guentzel is 28. That changes the term, which in turn will change the actual average annual value. But I think when you look at Cole Caulfield and you look at the contract that he was just given by Montreal, that is the perfect starting point for negotiations with Jake Guentzel. Guentzel's not going to get the 8 years, right? That is the maximum allowable under the CBA because he is with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But the Pens are not going to give Jake Guentzel 8 years because they don't want to put Jake Guentzel under contract until he's 36 years old. That's just not good business. But the $7.85 million average annual value, that's a good place for negotiations to start when it comes to the actual salary cap. Guentzel's going to be 29 years old when he signs that next deal, or when that next deal will kick in for him. So I believe the Penguins are probably going to look for a 4 to 5 year contract extension, leading him up to being 33, 34, maybe even a 6-year deal, get him up to the age of 35. They're going to look to lock him up for the rest of his prime, right? He's heading towards the peak of his prime right now. He's going to start the decline in a couple of seasons. The Penguins are going to want to eat all of those years up of Jake Guentzel. So a 4 to 5 year contract, I would imagine that gets the AAV to bump up. You're probably looking up at between $8 and $8.5 million. So a 5-year, $8 million contract, $40 million overall. That's probably around the range of what I expect for the Jake Guentzel contract if it's signed at some point before the salary cap and different contracts that are comparable are released, right? Because the whole premise of this conversation is Jake Guentzel and Cole Caulfield are comparable players. In my eyes, that's what they are. Now, Cole Caulfield at the end of the day might end up being a better player than Jake Guentzel is, But it's also different because he plays for the Montreal Canadiens, who are a team that for the past 2 seasons have finished in the bottom of the standings in the NHL. So the question then becomes, is Jake Guentzel worth a 4-year, 5-year, $8 million contract? He currently makes $6 million, so it would be a raise for Jake Guentzel, but it wouldn't be in the $9 to $10 million range. I think that would just be crazy to think about paying a guy that, yeah, I will say this, I don't think his numbers would be quite as high if he wasn't playing with one of the greatest players of the generation, but who cares? Because as of right now, for the foreseeable future, he's going to be playing with the greatest player of the generation, or one of the greatest players of the generation, no matter, depending on who you ask. So, yeah, that does get factored in, because it doesn't matter what he'd be like without him, because he's going to be with them. And if he's great with them, that's all you need to know. At least for the next, Crosby has 2 more years on his contract. He's floated the idea out there that he wants to play 3. We'll see what happens when his contract's actually up in a couple seasons. So that's 5 years right there. So for the majority of this hypothetical contract for Jake Guentzel, for the majority of that time, he'd be playing alongside Sidney Crosby. So that shouldn't be as big of a factor. I still think he's 100% worth 4 to 5 years, $8 to $8.5 million. If you can get it on the lower end of that, great. If you can get it down at 7.85 or even less than that, that's just phenomenal for Kyle Dubas and the Penguins. Because Guentzel has scored 30 or more goals in 3 of the past 5 seasons. And the 2 seasons that he didn't score 30 were shortened because of COVID. And guess what? He was already in the 20s. He probably would have scored close to or over 30 goals if those were full 82-game seasons. He's reached the 40-goal mark twice. He was the Penguins' leading scorer again this year for the 2nd straight season. And he's had over a point per game in 4 of the last 5 seasons. He didn't this past season, but the previous 4, he was over a point per game. Because of that, some people are saying, oh, Jake Guentzel's a great trade trip. And I ask that is why? Why do you want to trade Jake Guentzel? Most of what I'm seeing is because, well, his contract is expiring and a lot of teams would be interested. That's not enough of a reason to trade your top goal scorer over the past 5 seasons, and somebody that will likely be your top goal scorer for the next 2 or 3. Do you truly believe, because his contract is expiring, let's attack that angle first. Do you truly believe that he won't re-sign in Pittsburgh? Really? There is nobody on ice-wise that I would consider Crosby Jr. Maybe Connor Bedard will have to wait and see what he's able to do with Chicago next year. Nobody on the ice is, quote, Crosby Jr. But off the ice, Jake Guentzel is the closest thing that we have ever seen to Sidney Crosby off the ice. He is a carbon copy, and of course, that's because the second he got into the league, he just followed what Sidney Crosby did the entire time. Why? Because clearly it worked for Crosby, and clearly it's been working for Jake Guentzel as well. Shoot, Guentzel might even take a hometown pay cut like the rest of the core has. Because Crosby, for his entire career, has been underpaid. Evgeny Malkin just took a pay cut last offseason. Chris Letang just took a pay cut last offseason. Brian Rust probably left money on the table last offseason. Rickard Rakell probably left money on the table last offseason. Who's to say Jake Guentzel won't leave money on the table next offseason? Or in his next contract? It'd be great if the Penguins could get this deal done this summer. That way, they don't have to wait for the salary cap to jump and then the number to have to go up. Who's to say he won't take that pay cut? I know it's not a guarantee, but if there's any team and there's any player on this team that would do it, I would imagine Jake Guentzel is a pretty prime candidate for that. And I'll say this again because I've mentioned it so many times already. You don't trade Jake Guentzel away because you simply don't trade away 40 goal scorers when you're trying to win a championship. In the comments on YouTube the other day, somebody said, yeah, remember James Neal? That's true. It was a different time. It's a different time entirely. You don't trade away Jake Guentzel if you're trying to win a championship. Because who are you replacing him with right now? Mikhail Granlund? Danton Heinen? Are you bringing him back and replacing him there? You're going to need to spend that money. And Jake Guentzel has been, one, healthy for the majority of his career. He had the one shoulder injury that 1 year, and that was a fluke injury where, say what you will, anybody's getting injured going into the boards at that speed, at that angle. And that was basically it. He is a durable player, despite being undersized. He scores at will, 30-goal seasons, 40-goal seasons, 3 of the past 5 years. He's been at least a 20-goal scorer for 5 straight seasons, and he's been over a point per game for 4 of the last 5 seasons. He wasn't this year, but he scored over 70 points this year. Why are you trying to trade away one of the Penguins' best players? Now, if you're imagining that the Penguins need to rebuild, I'll give that to you. If you're a rebuilding team, that's the first move you make. That is the first move you make. Hey, we have a player on an expiring deal. Send him out to be a mercenary. Get yourself a first-round pick and a couple prospects, probably. First, a second, and a couple prospects. Whatever it ended up being. If you're trying to rebuild, that makes sense. The Penguins aren't trying to rebuild right now. They're trying to win a championship. So there is no chance. Even if Kyle Dubas goes into the media and says, sometimes teams need a shock to their system. That's not going to be the shock to the system. If it is, it's going to be an interesting however long Kyle Dubas is signed for. 7 years, 6 years, whatever it is. You don't trade Jake Guentzel. In fact, you sign Jake Guentzel. And in my eyes, Cole Caulfield just laid the groundwork for the Pittsburgh Penguins to get to an extension with Jake Guentzel. If they do it this year, it's going to save them money. Guentzel probably knows that. His agent probably knows that. So that's what's going to make the negotiation a little bit more difficult. But we'll have to wait and see if that stone gets unturned this summer, because there are, as I mentioned at the top of the show, plenty of other things for the Penguins to worry about. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.